Desiree Dorion, and I am your host of the CCMA Achimotak Conversation Series in honor and celebration of Indigenous History Month. Achimotak is Swampy Cree for Let's Talk About It Together. Today's guest is CCMA Award winner and nominee, Juno Award winner and nominee. She pushes boundaries, she blazes trail. She is my beautiful Anishinaabe sister, and I am so thankful that she is here with us today. Crystal Shawanda. Yay.
Hello, thank you so much for having me. So good to see you, Des.
It is so good to see you, and I'm so happy that you are here. One of the first questions that we always ask each other to locate ourselves in Indigenous country is, where are you from? So let's start there.
Awesome. I am from the Wikwemkong First Nations on Manitoba Island in Ontario, Canada, and I'm Ojibwe, Potawatomi, and Odawa.
How do you get from Wikwemkong? Did I say it right?
Wikwemkong.
Wikwemkong.
Yeah.
How do you get from Wikwemkong to Nashville? Can you tell us a bit about your story?
Yeah, for sure. My parents listened to country music, so I grew up on a lot of country music, like a lot of traditional stuff, mostly Hank Williams, and that was the staple in our house, and Hank Williams and Johnny Cash and that sort of thing. And I grew up on those stories of Nashville and the Grand Ole Opry, and my grandpa would talk about the Grand Ole Opry, and we used to watch reruns of the Hayride and the Grand Ole Opry shows, and my dad was a truck driver. Actually, I think he became a truck driver just so that he could make it possible for us to travel and see the world and somewhat, and to make our way to Nashville. I think that was kind of always his plan.
Gotta love Dad.
Yeah, for sure. So one day on his 1 year on our school break, on our spring break, he managed to get a trip down to Nashville, down past Tennessee. And he said, let's go. So we all loaded up in the truck and we came to Nashville. And from the very first trip into Nashville, I just fell in love with it. It's Music City. It's singers, songwriters, and musicians, and people who are just like me, a big town of dreamers, and growing up, I always kind of felt like I didn't fit in. I always, with my singing and all that sort of thing. And for once, here was this city full of people who were, thought just like me. And I felt like I could fit in here. So my last year of high school, from that moment on, I just started planning and plotting my escape to Nashville. So my last year of high school, right before my last year of high school, I actually dropped out of high school and packed up my pickup truck and moved to Nashville, Tennessee when I was 16 years old. And I went home for a break for about a year, a couple of years after that. But then after that, I came back and I've been here ever since.
You dropped out of high school at 16 years old in your pickup truck and said, see ya, I'm off to Nashville. What did your parents think?
It wasn't as crazy as it sounds. It was very planned out. I presented it to my parents like a business plan. I was always a logical thinker like that. And I told them, I've taken every music class that's available in my high school. I feel like I've learned everything that I can. And I always say, dropping out of high school is one of the best and worst decisions I ever made in my life. The worst decision for obvious reasons, and the best decision because, as bad as a decision as it was, it ended up leading me to my destiny, and so my parents were really supportive. So I took several trips with my dad down to Nashville, and we would ask questions about what was the best part of town, what was a safe neighborhood. I started mapping out routes all over the city. I had like this little notebook, and I would write down because I never drove on a highway before,
Yeah.
And so I would write down little notes like, okay, I take I-65 and then I get on this exit if I want to go here for the songwriting nights. And then if I want to go here, I go to this highway and I get off on this exit if I want to go to this open mic. And so, it was very planned out, and my parents were really supportive. And it was still pretty scary for them. But my mom always said, if I don't support you and do it along with you, you're going to do it anyways, and you'll make a bunch of foolish mistakes.
Yeah.
So it was more thought out than it sounded.
Yeah, it was methodological.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sure.
And you played actually at Tootsie's, and you did that specifically as well for a reason. How long did you play at Tootsie's for?
Oh my goodness. I played there for I maybe about 3 4 years before I maybe 3 years before I got my publishing deal, and then I
Mm,
played there another year before I got my record deal. But yeah, for me, the way I thought about it, like I used to sing up and down, all and down Broadway. But the way I figured it is like it's going to be hard for somebody to find me. Like if somebody sees me and they want to tell somebody about me, how are they going to find me in all these different bars and clubs, you know?
right.
And so Tootsie's was very unique. It's the big purple building. It's the
Yeah.
most famous honky tonk in Nashville because it's been here the longest. And, you know, it's legendary because everybody from Willie Nelson, Chris Christopherson, and Patsy Cline really did used to hang out there. You know, if you're sitting inside those walls, you're in the same place that these legends have been in. You know, Chris Christopherson wrote Sunday morning coming down on the rooftop when he was literally coming
Incredible.
down on a Sunday morning. You know,
Right.
so there's all these stories. And so I specifically picked Tootsie's because that way, if somebody sees me play there and they want to tell, you know, one of their somebody about me, they can say, oh, she plays down at Tootsie's. That's the big purple building. It was easy to find me. So I kind of made a deal with the owner. I said, if you give me enough gigs, I promise that I'll play here and only here, and I'll never play anywhere else. And so it was kind of like a little deal that I had with him, and it worked out.
Smart, smart. You got to be smart. Can you talk at all about the barriers that you faced as an Indigenous woman trying to break into mainstream country music?
Yeah, for sure. There was a lot of barriers, you know. When I first moved to Nashville when I was 16, I was, you know, I was too naive to be scared. So I went knocking on doors that I really had no right to be knocking on. But one day I got lucky. I was at a very big record label, and I was talking to the receptionist at the front desk. And this guy walked in, and he was about to go in the door that leads to all the offices, and he was just standing there looking through his keys, and I could tell that he was listening to me and pretending to, you know, do whatever he's doing. And then he looked up and he said, hey, I got a few minutes, come on in and play me a couple songs. I couldn't believe my luck. He introduced himself. I knew exactly who he was. Very famous producer who I actually admired and looked up to, and, you know, kind of hoped to work with one day. And so it was kind of crazy. I was shaking in my boots, and I went into the office. I played a couple songs for him, and afterwards he was like, well, that's amazing, your voice, it's like huge. He's like, but, and he kind of sat there quiet for a minute. He said, I don't know what I would do with you. He said, Native Americans within country music, I'm not really sure it matches up or makes sense. I'm not, I don't even know how I would market you, and I don't know if country music fans would be receptive. I don't know if they'd be ready for you.
Mm,
And you know, I was always trying to be more mature for my age so I could be taken seriously. And
mhm.
so, you know, no crying in baseball. And
Right.
so I just kind of took what he said, and I was like, okay. And I said, thank you for your time. I shook his hand and I left. And and I didn't really know what to do with that, you know, because if I was out of tune, I could try to take some voice lessons. If you didn't like my song, I could try to write another one, but there was nothing I could do about the color of my skin, you know, about who I was. And and so I kind of, after a couple months, I decided to pack it up and move back home, because what was the point, right? If Native Americans can't make it within country music, then I'm wasting my time here. And I kind of just, I said, when I went back home to my reserve, I said I was quitting music. And
Mm,
but no matter what, I ended up back on a stage, back in front of a microphone. And thankfully I had a lot of people in my hometown who were always telling me, you know, you have a golden ticket. If I had what you had, I would be long gone. And I would just keep trying no matter what. And between those people in my community and my family, that's what I did. I packed up and I moved back to Nashville, and I said, I'm not moving to Nashville for a recording contract. I'm moving to Nashville because I'm a singer. I make music. That's what I do. This is where I belong. And you know, eventually I got lucky and I got signed to a record deal with RCA Records. Um, but you know, it wasn't easy street from there. You know, I went out and I did my radio tour, and I definitely faced some racism and discrimination from everybody from DJs to country music fans. You know,
mm,
sometimes I had DJs making little jokes and little quips, and and I had to just grin and bear it, like, oh, ha ha ha, that's funny. I had a DJ make a joke about, remember the cartoon King of the Hill, and he made a
Yeah.
reference. He said, oh, I thought your hair would be blowing in the wind. And because in King
Oh,
of the Hill, the red corn, I think his name is, his hair is always blowing in the wind even when it's
yeah.
inside the house. So things like that, it doesn't sound like a big deal, but it always reminds you that you're different. And there's always these situations that sometimes made me feel, I don't know, the way people treated me, like I was an alien, like they didn't know how to talk to me or address me. And sometimes I would share stories of residential schools in Canada when I would do interviews, and people sometimes just outright didn't believe me. Like, I never heard of that. How can that be possible?
So it must have never happened because I don't know anything about it.
Yeah, yeah,
Right.
exactly. So, there was a lot of that. And then sometimes I would show up to country music festivals here in America, and people would say, oh, I thought you were the girl who sang You Can Let Go, Daddy. And I'm like, I am. And I just wasn't what they were expecting. And,
Mm.
looking back now, I see how some of my photos, my promo pictures, some of them were whitewashed to make me look a
Mm.
lot more fair skin. And so I can see how things may have been misleading for some people. And, so it's a little bit of everything,
I never,
even when they released my first single to country music radio in Canada, and people were calling in for You Can Let Go. And there is actually quite a few radio stations in Canada who said, oh, I'm sorry, Indigenous hours on Sundays from this time to this time. So you can call in for her song then. And actually, I was really thankful Warren Kopnick at Sony Music Canada, you know, lit a fire under their butts. He was like, what are you talking about? She's a country music singer who just happens to be Indigenous. Play her freaking song. People want to hear
right,
it.
right.
And he was very passionate about that. And it felt good to have somebody stick up for me with that much passion. So it was a little bit of everything.
That's incredible. You know, I never even thought about from a marketing standpoint, the ability to whitewash you in your marketing assets, like in your promotional photos. That's incredible that that's something that I've never even turned my mind to, that would be a possibility. What would you say to, you've identified several, the industry rep that you met with very early on, some of the radio folks that might not have wanted to play your music. What would you say, now, as that you've got more experience, to industry people?
I would say thank you for making me a fighter. Thank you for
Mm,
making me more stubborn than I've ever been in my life.
yeah.
you know, and you know, uh, and I hope that you've grown. I hope that you've changed. I hope that you've been enlightened. I hope that you have a more open mind and a more open heart now, all these years later. I certainly hope you have grown, because in life we should always be striving to become better. So I think that's what I would say to those people.
It's a beautiful example, I think, of your spirit, the generosity of that. I wish you well. I'm not wishing anything negative on you. I just hope that you know better so that you can do better going forward. You were pretty humble when I asked you about your story in terms of the success that you've had. You signed your record deal with RCA in 2007. Your song "You Can Let Go" reached the Billboard Top 20. Your album "Dawn of a New Day" sold over 50,000 copies. You and I first met in 2011. I had the privilege of opening a show for you. And before that, I watched your CMT special. I was one of the 50,000 people that bought your records. And you were someone that I looked up to, as an inspiration, as a hero. And I'm not saying this just to toot your horn. I think that you and I are past that. But you did inspire a generation of women and girls, especially in the Indigenous music community, in the Indigenous community. When you hear that, and when you hear stories of how you just doing your thing impacted other people, how does that sit with you? How does that resonate with you?
Well, I'm trying not to cry right now.
Crying,
So
you're
that's how it
crying.
makes me feel. um, it makes me think about when I almost quit, when I
Mm.
went back home, and it makes me happy and thankful that I came back again and that I didn't give up, because that's what it was always about. Is I kept thinking about how many more people are going to hear that, how many more Indigenous people are going to be told that and will go home and give up because of that. And when my album Dawn of a New Day was released and it made it in the top 20 Billboard chart, and my singles in the single was amazing, reaching in the top 20. That was amazing. But I was a little nervous about when they released the album, because I'm just like, please just at least sell more than 1,000 copies, because you just never know.
Yeah.
And I had a lot of amazing people around me, and I just didn't want to let them down because they were all working so hard. And when the album was released and it debuted at number 16 on the Billboard charts, and we, going into a Walmart or in a Target, and my album was in every stores across America and Canada. When I went into the store and bought it, and really experienced that and seen that, it was just this overwhelming. And when I saw that on the chart, on the Billboard charts, when I was holding it in my hands, it was just so overwhelming. It was in that moment, honestly, what I thought was, there now, no matter what happens after this point, if I crash and burn, if I never do anything again from this point on, no one can ever tell another Indigenous artist that you can't be successful within country music just because you're Indigenous.
Yeah.
And
I love
and that's
that.
what it was all about for me. I was so emotional, I cried, and that was what it was all about for me, as I wanted to prove that guy wrong, and everybody else who thought like him, I wanted to prove them wrong. And it's like, and if you want to say no to somebody, then give a different reason. But you can't say, no matter what, if some Indigenous kid, comes to Nashville or in Canada, is trying to sing country music, and somebody tells you you can't do it because you're Indigenous, then they can say, no, yes, I can, because it has been done. And
Right.
and so that's what I think about when I hear those stories. And it's an honor, because that's what it's always been about for me. And I know some people don't believe that, but it has always been about that for me. The way I was raised was, my mom always told me, you have a responsibility as an Indigenous person. You can't just go on like everybody else, because you have to represent us in a good way, and you have to represent in a way that could change things for our people. And I remember somebody at RCA Records saying, wow, that's a lot for your mom to put on you. And
Mm.
I'm like, but that's how it should be. That's how
Yeah.
it should be for all of us Indigenous people, is, because we're not on mainstream TV all the time. We're not in the movies all the time. We're not on the radio all the time. And there needs to be more representation. And in order for that to happen, we have to, all of us, fight together to make that happen. And so I always took that response. Ever since I was a little kid, I understood that. And it was always about future generations. Everything I'm doing is for future generations to take that torch and blow my records away, take it further than I ever hoped to take it. I want that to happen, because it'll make winners out of all of us.
I have no doubt in my mind that it will happen, and that you and your presence and your art has helped to push those boundaries. And I'm so thankful for the work that you put in to break down those barriers for the people who are coming up behind you. I want to change gears a little bit. On May 28th, the news broke that the remains of 215 children were found at the Kamloops Residential School. You're an Indigenous mother. I'm an Indigenous mother. Your beautiful little girl, Jaja. Um, you know, how does that impact you as a mom?
Oh, it impacts me big time. I take it really hard, because I just can't imagine. I can't imagine what the families went through, what the mothers and fathers went through, and what those babies went through. Because all children are babies. It doesn't matter what their age is. They're at that time in their life is supposed to be innocent.
Yeah.
And I work really hard to keep my daughter's innocence intact. I'm so protective of her. That's why I don't even travel with a nanny or live or leave her with a nanny, because I honestly feel like no one can ever watch her the way I watch her. So um, hearing that news was just heartbreaking, and it haunts me.
Mm-hmm.
Ever since then, I'm trying to keep a brave face for my little girl. And I sneak in the I gotta go put laundry in the dryer, and when I'm there I'm letting out some tears.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go fix your snack, and while I'm fixing her snack I'm letting out those tears, because I don't want to. She's so smart. She's very intuitive. She knows when something's up. So
Yeah.
she'll ask me, "Mommy, are you crying?" And I'm like, "No, no, no. I just got something in my eye, and because I'm trying to protect her." And but we made a little memorial here on our front steps. We did that together, and I talked about it with her a little bit, but I didn't tell her um the harshness of it, how horrible it was. I just kind of danced around it because she's 4 and I want to keep
She's
her
4, yeah.
innocent. And but she knew that some babies didn't make it home to their mommies and daddies. And so she felt very sad for them. And it's just heartbreaking. It's horrific. I feel helpless. Like, what can I do? What can be
Mm-hmm.
done? What can we do? I don't know what the answer is. And it's at times I like, how do we keep moving on? Like, even as we're getting ready for the Juno Awards, it feels so as grateful as I am, it feels so silly that we're still carrying on.
Mm.
Sorry.
Mm.
But yeah, it feels like the world should stop for this, and it
Yeah.
isn't stopping. And so yeah, I'm I'm struggling.
Yeah. No, I hear that. And I feel like, we've been having a lot of these conversations in my house as well. But I also feel like we've had these conversations already. You know, we've had books in our home to talk to our daughters about. I have 2 little girls, Grace and Natalie, who are 9 and 7, and we've been talking to them about residential schools since they were little, like Jaja's age, 3,
Mhm.
4 years old. We've been reading them stories and talking to them about our own family history with residential school. And I think that for me, my hope is that these children, our children, that their deaths weren't for nothing, that it's not just, that it can't just be in vain, that this has to be something that motivates the broader community, the mainstream community, to do something. And even if it is just to pick up a book and learn something, or listen to this conversation, for example, that you and I are moms. We're human beings just like anybody else, and we love our babies just like anybody else. And I think that that's one beautiful thing that comes across in the work that you do, that you're always so empathetic. And having spent time with you, the energy that you give off is just so honest and real. And I hope that that resonates with the broader community. That's my hope.
And there's things that you know you know for me, like you said, we've been having these conversations, we've been talking about this, we've always known, the Indigenous community has always known what happened at those schools because of the stories that were passed down to us from our relations. And and so for me there's always that active defiance, in the way
Yeah.
that I carry myself. Even when you think about that experience that I had with that producer, when I came back to Nashville, I came back and I decided that I was going to be more proud than ever of who I am as an Indigenous woman. So I always wore my beadwork, I always wore my medicine bag around my neck. Um, a lot of people put the little pouch and they pin it on the inside of their shirt. Sometimes people, actually fellow Indigenous people comment like, why do you feel you always need to wear the medicine bag? And like, because I'm proud. I'm
Mhm.
proud of the medicine that I carry. I'm proud of who I am. I'm proud of my culture. I'm proud of my roots. And, I remember in media training being told, you shouldn't wear that around your neck when you do the radio tour because people will think that you're pagan. And I'm like, well, that's when I'll inform them that I'm Indigenous and this is my culture,
Wow.
and it follows through with even with my little girl, we always call her Jaja, but her full name is actually Shawanda, which is actually the proper pronunciation of my last name, Shawanda. That's how it
Mm.
was supposed to be said. That's what it's how it's supposed to be spelled, but it was changed through assimilation. And so, um, when Jaja was born, when I knew I was pregnant with a little girl, we decided that we would call her Jawande, as an act of resilience
I love
because,
that. That's so beautiful.
at one time people had the power to change the pronunciation and spelling of our last name. And now we're living in a day where now not only can we spell it and say it the proper way, but it can be her first name.
Yeah.
And so that was really important to me. So there's all these different little acts of defiance of and pride of who we are.
Resistance.
Yes,
Resistance.
resistance,
Yeah. It's
absolutely,
beautiful. It's
for sure.
beautiful.
And I wave it on a flag, and people, sometimes that makes people ask me a lot of questions about who I am and my culture, and I'm always happy to teach people. And I know, something we say is, it's not my responsibility to teach you, but you know what, sometimes people just aren't going to Google it. And so I'm happy to teach people. I'm going to keep teaching people. I'm never going to get tired of answering those
Yeah.
questions. If people are willing to learn and embrace, then I'm going to keep teaching people.
I love that. I think that that's another beautiful example of, you know, the generosity, the generous spirit that, most Indigenous people have, many Indigenous people have, and the grace that we have. We've talked about your country music success, but you recently, not super recently, but not too long ago, made the decision to make the switch to blues.
Yes.
Why? Why?
um, you know, I've always said in my story, I've always said that I was raised on country music, and I was, but I was also raised on a lot of other music. I had two older brothers, and my one brother listened to straight up rock music, and my other brother listened to a lot of blues and Tom Petty. and
Mm.
so it had an influence on me. I would sit at the top of the stairs, and he'd be downstairs, making, because he was a dancer, so he'd be working on his regalia, or he's also a hunter, so sometimes he'd be downstairs making bullets, and he'd be listening to blues music, and he'd be singing along with Muddy Waters, and I don't know, I just connected to it. I could hear the heartbreak in his voice. I could hear that whoever was singing in that, out of those speakers, had a hard life, and I connected to that, and I could just feel it, and then, looking back now, my favorite country music singer and songwriter was Hank Williams. And now when I look back, it all makes sense. But Hank Williams was actually, everything he knew about music was what he learned from an old blues singer by the name of Rufus Payne. They also called him T-Tot. And so he taught him how to play guitar, how to be an entertainer, how to talk in between songs, how to write songs, how to sing them. So Hank Williams was a country blues man, and Hank Williams influenced a lot of people, songwriters and singers and musicians. And so in a way, the sound that shaped country music stemmed from blues music. And so, like, when I was a kid, there was this woman in my community, Gloria Eshkabuk, who was just this amazing singer. She had this big, huge voice, right? This powerful voice, like kind of like Etta James. And she would come to the talent nights, and she would do like Cheating Heart, but she would do it real bluesy. And I remember sitting there listening, and I was like, I didn't know you could do that. I didn't know you could take a song and make it different and change it.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I started doing that, and I started having fun with it, and I loved it. you know. And then fast forward, you know, to when I got discovered at Tootsie's, you know, we were in the back room of Tootsie's because, you know, we weren't playing top 40 country radio hits. We were put in the back room because we were playing Muddy Waters and BB King and Janis Joplin and Etta James. And so the owner was like, "Yeah, you guys are good, but I'm going to stick you in the back room." And so when when I got discovered, you know, Joe Galani really loved that about me, that I was different. And so that's why if you listen on my first album, Dawn of a New Day, I do a cover of Cheating Heart, but it's way different than the way Hank did it. It's, you know, I'm exaggerating all those bluesy undertones that were there, the way he wrote it, you know, where his influences came from. I took it all the way there. And so, and throughout my years within country music, every time I would release a single to country radio, you know, my friends at country radio, the ones who really did support me, would, you know, kind of pull me aside and they'd be like, "You know, we love you, Crystal." They're like, "But your voice is like really bluesy." And it just like, we don't know what to do. Sometimes it's like, "We love you. You're super talented. We love your songs." But, you know, he's like, "Here's country music radio. It's this, you know, it's moving along." And then all of a sudden you come in with your real bluesy stuff and it's just like, woo, and you just kind of stick out like a sore thumb. Um, and you know, and it wasn't really about me being indigenous at that point. At that point, there was people who were like, "It's just because you sound so bluesy." And I would show up to country music festivals and I'd be covering Janis Joplin and BB King, and you know, and promoters were like,
What's
"What is
going
this?"
on?
So I confused a lot of people. And finally I just said, "You know what? People keep saying I sound really bluesy. Maybe that's something I should explore." And then we were in the middle of recording my third country album, and we had like 7 or 8 songs recorded, and I was sitting there listening back to the songs and I realized I didn't like any of them.
Mm.
I felt like I was trying to fit into where country music radio was going at that time. It was kind of getting more poppy, which is really awesome. You know, there's a lot of amazing singers in country music right now, and a lot of amazing country music songwriters. Like, man, like they're just taking it to a whole nother level. But it's just not what I want to do. You know, it's not what
Yeah.
I grew up on. It's not what I aspire to do. So it felt like I was trying to be something that I wasn't. And that just didn't feel authentic to me. And so I unplugged. I abandoned that album. I took a couple months off, and one day after watching the news, I was just kind of plunking on my guitar, and I was just so depressed. All this headlines, all this depressing news on the news, you know, it's like, "Oh
Mm.
yeah, this is why I don't watch the news." and
Yeah.
and then I just started writing this song, and it was called "The Whole World's Got the Blues." And D Wayne came running out of the kitchen and he's like, "What is that you're playing?" I'm like, "I don't know. I think I'm just writing it." And so he sat down with me and we finished it. And then we were like, "What do we do with this song?" And then at that time, I was releasing music through my own record label, New Sun Records. And so I said to my husband, I said, "Well, since I don't like the country album we just did, why don't we release a blues album? I mean, isn't that why we started our own label, so we could do what we want?"
Do what you want. Live
Yeah.
honestly.
And so he was like, "You're crazy." And I'm like, "Let's just do it. You know, I want to do this. And then we'll release this. We'll see how it feels. And if we don't like it, we'll go back to country." And I honestly, I thought it was just going to be a side project that I was going to do. But
And
then
here
after,
you are with Church
yes,
House Blues, nominated for 2 Juno Awards. And we are pre-recording this conversation, of course, but the Juno Awards are this weekend. So by the time this episode airs, the Juno Awards will have already taken place. How are you feeling leading up to the Juno Awards?
it feels amazing. I know people always say that, like, "I don't care if I win or lose," but I really mean it. I don't care if I win or lose, because I'm just so happy and grateful to still be here in the
Yeah.
business, singing my heart out. I feel really grateful and thankful that after all these years, I'm still here. The music business and music industry is allowing me to exist with my little piece of the pie.
I
and
am
I'm just really grateful, you know, because I just want to keep singing my heart out, and to be recognized by my peers. It's really an honor, because there's a lot of amazing artists out there, a lot of amazing albums. So I'm really thankful. You know, for me, singing the blues was like letting a bird out of a cage. I feel like I'm
Mm.
flying free, and now I just don't think I can ever stick her back in there.
I love that. And I hope that you continue to make music. Like I'm not one of your number one fans, and I can't wait to see what comes next for you. And I'm thankful to you, Crystal, for sitting down with me today for this conversation and this exchange. And you know, I look forward to seeing what comes next for you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. You know, I'm a fan of your music. I think you're an amazing storyteller, and you're telling stories that need to be told, that haven't been told, you know. And I'm just really grateful that we've been able to connect and write together and make
Yeah.
music together. And I'm thankful for the friendship, you know, sisterhood and camaraderie among females in the music industry is special. But you know, it's even more special with, you know, my fellow Indigenous, all my relations, for us to support each other, to cheer each other on. So thank you for the invitation, and thank you to CCMAs for creating this space to have these conversations.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Thank you, miigwech.